resolve generational woundedness and vulnerabilities of all kinds as a social scientist, as a shamanic and akashic counselor, and as a family constellation therapist for the past 20 years. Family constellation is a systemic and psychospiritual therapeutic model that reveals the hidden intergenerational dynamics in a family, a relationship, or a situation. And the approach works towards balancing, neutralizing, and healing, or what I call liberating the system. So drawing on German psychotherapist Bert Hellinger and trained by Indian psychotherapist Dr. Gaurav Dekka, I combine family systems, beliefs, and attitudes, nation state, national systems, beliefs, and attitudes, epigenetics, neuroplasticity, emotions, somatics, genotraumograms, and of course, divine crone awareness to form a therapeutic container. And I use this container to identify and liberate trauma from our emotional and physical bodies and our family lines. In particular, I use genotraumograms to map and assess systems, beliefs, and attitudes of families or relationships or issues. And I embed the genotraumograms within systems of nationhood to understand how individual and family traumas are entangled with national history, right? We often think that traumas are deeply singular, but in fact, traumas are systemic and they're tied to our family lines, and our family lines are tied to our national histories. So I've basically reimagined Hellinger and Dekka's work, and I've named my process as Intergenerational Family Trauma Liberation Constellation, or IFTLC. So it's a take on tender loving care. So using the IFTLC method, I facilitate liberation from trauma of all kinds. I work with addiction, anxiety, fear, guilt. I work a lot with depression and hopelessness, compromised self-esteem and self-acceptance. I definitely work on marital issues and premarital counseling, interpersonal relationship issues. I work with financial issues, family crime. A large part of my practice focuses on sexual abuse and other forms of abuse, creative, spiritual, and energetic blocks, childhood trauma. Health issues are a large one. I work with multiple forms of diseases and relationship with food and weight, land disputes, legal issues, parenting challenges. And most of all, my primary expertise lies in reproductive health care. And particularly, I focus on abortions, miscarriages, and stillbirths. And so the work that I do is informed by epigenetics. Simply put, I'm watering it down. Epigenetics is the study of how our environment can modify our gene expression and cause changes to the ways our genes work across generations. And so a pioneering example is Dr. Rachel Yehuda's groundbreaking research on the children of Holocaust survivors and of pregnant women who survived the 9/11 attacks in New York. And here's Dr. Yehuda found that genetic changes that stemmed from the trauma suffered by Holocaust and the 9/11 survivors, and those changed gene expressions, they were passed down to their children, right? So this is the space that I'm doing my work in. So I identify patterns of generational traumas in family lines within the context of the nation. And I serve to resolve or bring balance to the system And what I mean by that is my work is about creating family interactions that are authentically supportive and nourishing. And I use the larger method of family constellations. So my most recent publication is about reproductive trauma, and it's forthcoming in Hypatia, a journal of feminist philosophy. Hypatia, it's a peer-reviewed academic journal published by Cambridge University Press. And the article is entitled Bones of the Womb, right? And in this chapter, I demonstrate how to heal algorithms of reproductive trauma in BIPOC communities in the US, so Black, Indigenous, people of color. And I produce an epistemology of grief that's life affirming for us BIPOC folks in the US. So it's not about getting over our trauma, it's about sitting in our trauma and honoring our grief, right? That's the path out. So that's what I argue in this chapter. And I use shamanic ceremonies, prayers, rituals, spells, and I call on the ancestors to accomplish this. I think it's really clear that in my therapeutic orientation, I don't make a false binary distinction between modern or Western science and Indigenous healing epistemologies, right? So I don't subscribe to that dichotomous worldview. Rather, my framework of working with trauma is through the North American Indigenous lens known as two-eyed seeing. And two-eyed seeing was originated by the Wabanaki elder Albert Marshall. He argues that humans and our experiences of the world are interdependent and interconnected with the natural and spiritual worlds. And so my point here is that the dominant paradigm of positivist biomedical psychiatry and psychology, they are very quick to dismiss indigenous and alternative wisdoms or ways of knowing as unscientific and lacking in empirical evidence. Wabanaki psychiatrist Dr. Louis Mel Madrona, he vehemently challenges this worldview, and he argues that we Indigenous folks, we've been concerned with mental health for thousands of years, right? And Indigenous psychology and healing, I think we have something to offer to the modern world. So in my estimation, we desperately need new terminology or a new language that helps us appreciate the wisdom of the veiled world and non-normative epistemologies to complement contemporary scientific approaches. I would argue that we need an integrative knowledge system to produce a humanistic approach that not only supports human survival, but also supports humans to thrive in their lives, right, across our lifespans. So as a trauma liberation scholar and family constellation therapist, I critically center two-eyed seeing by integrating sacred ancestral knowledges with other modern knowledge systems. And my scholarship and my therapeutic approach, they don't fit within one core discipline because I'm undoing and unpartnering with normative healing epistemologies, or what we would identify as Western science, right? And so what this means is that both my research and scholarship and therapy practice, it uncovers how we as humans can live our lives fully while on earth. And this means wholly embracing the good, the bad, and the ugly in our lives. And it would also behoove us to understand that our earthly experiences are interconnected. And if we can tap into this interconnection, then we can live our lives fully, right? So in this way, as a trauma healing academic and practitioner, I work to create ethical healing spaces that are informed by empirical research, right? And at the same time, I operate with a deep humility of not knowing, right? And so I really would like for us to sit in this, right? So there's a space where the work is informed by empirical research, but the space is also connected to a space of not knowing. And so I approach this work with deep humility and deep reverence of not knowing and wanting to know. And so for me, what this means is that I'm incessantly looking for different perspectives and better ways of showing up and operating in the world, right? So my orientation is always, how is it that we want to show up in the world? And how is it that we want to operate in the world? And I think we have choices here, like we have free will. We can choose to stay stuck in patterns that are no longer serving us. We can choose, for example, to stay stuck in, a victimhood paradigm, or we can choose to operate in ways that are supportive and nourishing to ourselves and to the people around us and to the communities that we live in. And that actually requires us stepping away from our belief systems that we grew up with. That requires us giving up behavioral patterns that we have been stuck in for decades and decades and decades. And yeah, for sure, some of these behavioral patterns serve to protect us. But there comes a time when these patterns are no longer of service to us. And so that's what I mean about that I'm constantly looking for different perspectives and better ways of showing up and operating in the world. As a point of shamanic reference, right, here's why the work that I do is so important. A single generation healed, right? So one person, one generation healed impacts 7 generations forward, meaning our descendants, and backward, meaning our ancestors, right? So my healing, like my personal healing, impacts my offspring, and it impacts my parents and my grandparents. And so I want you to sit in this 7 generations, right? 7 generations equals 840 years. One generation healed impacts 7 generations. That's 840 years, right? 840 years, right? If we can change, if I can alter my gene expression, right, from the traumas that I've experienced, this heals the gene expressions of my ancestors and my descendants. And so I do this work for our youth, right? I'm inviting you to bring together different ways of knowing, is what I'm saying, right? Different ways of knowing with a capital K. And as I invite you to bring bring together different ways of knowing, my point here is we need to do this in order to support opportunities for our youth versus compromising our youth, right? Versus compromising our children. We're all very stuck on being good parents, those of us who do have children. But we don't think about what we need to do to heal ourselves, right? This work is important, especially if we are choosing to be parents. And so I'm inviting you to do this because we all that we're here, we need to leave this world a better place. And so if we do this work and we're impacting 7 generations forward and backward, then you have to multiply 840 years by 2. So this work is actually heals 1,680 years. And so in ending, I do this sacred work of embodied healing and human transformation with deep humility, with deep reverence to my ancestors. And I engage with modern science, and I combine this by returning to the medicinal healing fires of our ancestors and Indigenous epistemology. And so that's it. Thank you for joining us today. This talk is part of the IPHM Festival, and if you're interested in holistic wellness, then do sign up for their newsletter at iphm.co.uk, and I can be reached at drrockbad@gmail.com.
That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to type. I actually have my apprentice who studies with me and researches with me, Riley Love. She's on this call. And my associate from Healing Without Borders, Ben, he's on this call. So I'm going to put our information in the chat box so that you can reach us. And I'm happy to answer any questions, Siobhan.
Does anyone have any questions? If you have any questions, do you want to unmute yourself or pop it in the chat? I think, yeah, we've just got your information in there. I have a question. This might be a really, my question is, the standout moment for me was when you said, like, if you can heal like a generation, then it will heal like 7 generations forward and 7 back. And that just really blew my mind, because I'm really interested in like inherited trauma and stuff like that. But I wondered how your ancestors are healed, if like, sort of, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do know what you mean. So part of what we need to orient ourselves in is that our ancestors want us to do the work. They want us to do the healing work. And so oftentimes what happens is what shows up in a family constellation therapy session, oftentimes what the traumas that we're carrying does not necessarily belong to us. The traumas that we're carrying belong to someone in our family line, either a particular ancestor or a group of ancestors. And so, Bert Hellinger argues that those of us who are still living, right, in the earthly plane, we have such deep compassion and love and loyalty. We're not conscious of this. We have this really deep loyalty to our family line. And so one of the largest themes that I find in the clients and patients who come to work with me is that they are unconsciously trying to balance the family system. So maybe something really horrible happened in the family system. Maybe there was incest, maybe there was rape. And so we care these, and remember, these energies are passed down, right? Remember I argued, Dr. Yehuda found, right, Holocaust survivors and 9/11 survivors, their cortisol levels were deeply compromised. And the result, the result of this was passed on to their children. So the research shows that the children of 9/11 survivors and Holocaust survivors, they are more prone to depression. They're more prone to suicide, right? But they didn't experience it. They didn't experience 9/11. They didn't experience the Holocaust, right? If I think about my own background, right, my ancestral heritage is in the Indian subcontinent, and I've always had this overwhelming fear of homelessness. Didn't make sense because I came from a family who was wealthy, but I always had this fear of being homeless. And what my family constellation revealed is because my ancestors, generations back, were part of multiple partitions, right? They were displaced. They were forced to leave. They had to leave their belongings. And family members were separated during the multiple partitions in the Indian subcontinent, right? This was passed down to me, and I'm 3 generations removed, right? 3 generations removed from the Indian subcontinent. And yet my gene expressions are tied to the experiences of my ancestors being displaced, forcefully displaced from their homes. So when we heal, we heal the past, right? We heal that energy. And then we're also transmuting our gene expression, which we're passing down to our offspring. Does that answer your question, Siobhan?
It did. Thank you so much.
Hold on. Okay. Oh no, I thought there were, okay. Marissa, who's my colleague and my dear friend.
I had the same question. I understand the healing moving forward. But I'm struggling understanding the past healing, but that explanation helped. And also I have another question. Yes, it relates to trauma. And I think we've discussed this before, but it also, I'm assuming this also relates to the way you feel when you have this deep connection to something and you can't explain why. Like, yes, from trauma, but also from I don't want to say positive, but from a, you feel something inside that you can't pin why.
Yes, this is exactly it, right? So I'm just talking about I'm sharing my story in that I couldn't pinpoint why I felt so lonely, why I felt helpless. I just couldn't pinpoint. And the stories I didn't know that the stories were not mine, right? And I love that you're saying, where I would bet that so many of us on this call have felt like this profound loneliness, this profound hopelessness, and just no explanation, just this hollowness. And I remember, I don't remember who said this. I do know it was an elder from an Indigenous community in the United States. And she said, this loneliness that we feel comes from, the mother whale who lost her child because humans killed her child. And so we're feeling this grief, right? Around the world, we're feeling this grief of all the babies that we've killed, and the mothers are left behind, right? From the animal world. We feel this because remember, Albert Marshall argues we are all interconnected. We're connected to one another. We're connected to spirit, and we're connected to the natural world. So we're feeling this is we feel family grief, ancestral grief, and we also feel collective grief. There's no way out of this. I wish I could say we could just step out of this. We can't. We can't be disembodied. The way to work through this is to be embodied. The way to work through this is to step into the grief, not to bypass it.
I think everyone's mind is just like blown. So that's amazing. Thank you.
Riley Love, I want everyone to say hi to Riley Love. She's freaking amazing.
Hi, everyone. I have a question, Dr. B, because I don't ask you enough questions every day. Do you see that certain symptoms of intergenerational trauma, like the loneliness that you felt, maybe addiction, maybe, you know, reproductive trauma, do you see that these are specific symptoms of specific events? Do these patterns repeat themselves not only for specific families, but for, I know you work with you know, clients across the world. Do you see that your maybe American patients experience a similar pattern of symptoms and traumas as opposed to maybe your clients in the UK? Or do you see patterns like that?
There aren't, grief cuts across culture, right? Grief cuts across race, class, sexuality, and the patterns are common. The experiences of grief may manifest in like culture specific ways, but the larger patterns completely cut across culture, right? I work with a lot of parents come to me because their children have ADHD, and they're at a loss because nothing's really worked, and this is like globally. And the most common pattern that I've seen with children who develop ADHD is because there's been a child that has died in the system, right? This is a common pattern. And so this child who has developed ADHD is wanting attention from their parents, right? And so the development of ADHD creates a container of that attention, because the parents' attention, whether they're conscious of it or not, is on a child that has died in the system, or there's been a child that's died in the ancestral system, right? So there could be something that's happened in the immediate family, but it could be because there's something that happened in the ancestral line that is still that is impacting the family that's here right now. Does that make sense?
Yes, that definitely makes sense.
Yeah. As I mentioned, my area of expertise is in reproductive trauma, and another common theme is I've seen siblings, right? Siblings who've lost a twin, right? That sibling that's left over.
Sul piano nazionale e anche sul piano internazionale.
Okay, I'll just finish this because time's up. I'll just finish this. That sibling that has survived feels an immense guilt for surviving, and that the twin passed away. And so then that sibling follows death. And one of the ways that the sibling follows death is that they are consistently engaging in self-sabotaging behavior. I'm going to have to end here because the time's up. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. That was amazing. That was absolutely amazing. I can't wait to share this with everybody.
Take care.
Cheers.